All right, this is page 9 of your notes. And today we're going to talk about domain and range again, but we're going to look at continuous functions. And so a continuous graph, we talked about on the last note sheet, is where all of the data points are connected. And so we're going to look at specifically continuous graphs and how we can write domain and range for them. And we're going to use inequality symbols. So the first thing is you look at your graph and you need to actually what I call box it in. So if your graph has endpoints, you're going to box it in, and we do that so that we can see where the graph starts and ends. And so if I box it in, it's like I'm taking this graph and I'm putting it inside a box, and I'm not going to let there be any extra space. Okay, but a box doesn't really form to fit the thing inside of it, right? You just put the stuff inside and you close it up, so it's a box. And we want to look and see the domain. And so remember last time we talked about domain being all of the x values. And so when I look at domain, I want to look at my x-axis and I want to see where did my box start. My box started right here at 0, as I'm looking at the x-axis only, and it goes all the way, and I'm going to scribble on the number line on the x-axis all the way over to 1250. And so my domain goes from 0 to 1250. But we write this a particular way. We write it using inequality symbols. And so if I think about it, all of my numbers are bigger than 0, but less than 1250. So this one's pretty easy. It's less than or equal to 1250. And we're talking about domain, so we use the letter X. And then I kind of have to think about it backwards. I would say X is greater than or equal to 0. But I don't want to write it that way since my X is in the middle. I'm going to flip it around and say 0 is less than or equal to x. And really we would read it from the center. We would cover this up and we would say x is greater than or equal to 0, which is true. X is bigger or equal to 0. And then if I cover up this side, I'm also saying x is smaller than or equal to 1250. Now we also write this in words, and you're going to see them both ways on my quizzes and the STAR test. And so this one would say all real numbers between 0 and 1250. What do we mean by real numbers? So over here on the side, I'm going to write real numbers include your fractions or decimals. Okay. And I'm including fractions because every single point on this line is connected, which means every single number between 0 and 1 is included, and between 1 and 2 is included, and so on. So all of the numbers on this line, which is not just the 0, the 250, the 500, it's every single number in between, and in between those numbers are fractions. So all real numbers between 0 and 1250. Your range, we're going to look at the y values, okay? And we're going to say it starts here at 10 because that's where my box started on the y-axis, and it goes all the way up to 110. So from 10 to 110, and again, we're including every single number, so we would say all real numbers between 10 and 110. This one did not start at 0. It started here at 10. That's where my box starts. And so algebraically, we would say 10 to 110 and we're talking about y, so we put that in the middle. And where every number is smaller than or equal to 110, so y is less than or equal to 110, and then anything bigger than 10, which would look backwards because we always read it from the variable, y is greater than or equal to 10. So anytime you have two inequalities, you're going to use the less than or equal to symbols. All right, we're going to look at a couple different graphs here. They look similar, but they have a difference. And the difference here is that this graph has endpoints. And this graph goes on forever. And so when I have endpoints, I want to box it in so I can see where does it start and where does it end. So if I'm looking at the domain is my x values, and I'm going to look only at my x-axis. Where does my x-axis start? It starts right here at -5 and goes all the way over to +8. So from -5 to +8. And we're including those numbers. They're closed circles. And we'll look at some examples later that have some open circles. And then we're going to talk about the range, and the range is your y values. And where does it start? You go from bottom to top, smallest to largest. So here it starts at -8 and goes all the way up to +5. So from -8 to +5, and again, we're including those numbers. And then if I look at the one on the right, this one has arrows. So my x, my domain, okay, doesn't just start here. It goes on and on and on. Yes, it's going up, but it's going up and right. So it's going to keep going forever. And then if I look down here, it's going down, but it's also going to the left. And so it's going to go left forever, which means my domain is all real numbers. It's everything. Everything is part of that graph. And if I look at the range, we just talked about this as well. It is going up forever. So it's going up here forever, but I want to look at my axis. And it's also going down forever. And so again, the range would be all real numbers. So when we have arrows, we have to look at things a little bit differently. Okay, turn yours over. I have a different page here. All right, let's look at this first graph. Okay, this first one is actually a quadratic function. And we haven't really talked about the different types of functions, but this one's quadratic. It's a U or an upside down U shape, which is called a parabola, and we'll talk more about that later. And so we need to look again at domain and range. So let's look at first the domain, which is my x values. And if I look here, I have arrows, so I can't box it in because it's going to go on forever at some point. And so this arrow right here is pointing down, but it's also going to the right. And this arrow over here is pointing down, but it's also going to the left. So on my number line, I'm going to the right forever, and I'm going to the left forever. So my domain is all real numbers. And then my range is the y values, and my y values do have a starting point. They start up here at 9. And then they're going down, 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 and then we see that it has an arrow. These arrows are pointing down. So this graph goes down forever, starting at 9. So we would say y is my range, is less than or equal to 9. And if we were to write this one in words, it would be all real numbers less than or equal to 9. Okay. The next one is an exponential function. And it creates a curve. And now this curve never touches 0. Okay? And we'll talk definitely more about the properties of exponential functions next semester. But for this one, it just never touches 0. So it's getting smaller and smaller. And that's my domain. Again, that's my x values. Okay, so if I'm looking at the domain, this is going to the left forever, and it's also going to the right forever. Now it's going up and right, so you can't just see it's not just going straight right, but up and right, just like that other question. And so your domain is all real numbers. And then the range is your y values, and so it's easy to see that your y values are going up forever. But I just mentioned that even though it looks like it's going down forever, it's only going to come to the 0. It's actually never going to touch 0. So your range is y is less than 0. So it would look like this in words, all real numbers less than 0. All right, one more, and I'm going to actually cut out some of this. I really just want to look at the domain and range. So if I look at this graph, it has endpoints. And so since it has endpoints, we should box it in. And once I have it boxed in, I'm looking for domain, which is x, so I look only at the x-axis. Where does the box start? And it starts right here at 0, and it goes all the way over to 16. And so we would write it from 0 to 16. Move this up so you can see a little better. And we put x in the middle, and these are closed circles, so less than or equal to. And then if I talk about the range is my y values, and again I want to look at just my y-axis and where does it start, and it also starts at 0 and goes all the way up to 2,000. So from 0 to 2,000. And that's y, and you put your symbols.